Hello, and welcome to the Nintendo Power Retrospectives. I'm Count Zero. This week, we are covering Nintendo Power issue number 35 for April of 1992. Last time, we had the ballot for the Nestor Awards, and this issue, theoretically, they're tabulating all the votes, so next time, we get to find out who won. Before I get too far into things, I do want to apologize for my lack of comprehensibility in my picks for last issue. Usually I try to do some in-depth analysis, but because of my copyright strike and having to split my episode into two 15-minute chunks, or approximately 15 minutes, that was the spot that I could most easily cut. I apologize. With that out of the way, I've got a lot of material to cover this issue, so let's get started. Our cover game this issue is WWF Super WrestleMania, featuring Hulk, really freaking racist, Hogan, dropping the leg on Earthquake. I think from here, we're going to have less and less diorama covers and more photographic or art covers, as far as painted art, which I kind of think is a loss for the magazine. Well, in the letters column, you've been asked what you'll do for a Klondike bar. Now, here's the real question. What will you do for a SNES? That's the topic for the letters this issue. Probably my favorite letter is from a kid who would swim the Pacific Ocean, go over Angel Falls in a barrel, skydive from orbit, and also do his homework. That is someone who has comic timing. Sadly, our trend of movie release and Nintendo Power game publication synergy is lacking this issue, as we have Captain America and the Avengers from Data East this time, while we aren't getting another installment of the Marvel Cinematic Universe until next year. We do have the trailer for Avengers, or other Captain America, the Civil War coming out, or out as of this recording. It's not quite the same. The game has multiple routes you can take based on which Avenger you select, Cap or Hawkeye. As you make your way through the game, you can find two other Avengers, the Vision and Iron Man as well, with the Wasp serving as your mission control as you make your way through the game. The article gives maps of the game's levels through New York, covering your first boss fight against the Wizard and your second with the Mandarin. However, this just opens up the second half of the game with more boss fights against Crossbones, Ultron, and finally Red Skull himself. You know, Mandarin and Ultron on their own could make for a good game antagonist on their own right. Man, what is it with games that borrow the sort of non-linear gameplay style of Bionic Commando and just manage to screw it up? Thus is the case with Captain America and the Avengers. The game has you making your way across the US as Hawkeye and Cap, originally separately, and then, once the two characters link up, you can swap between the two in each level. The problem is that the first few levels of the game are fairly monotonous. Indeed, Cap and Hawkeye's first levels are effectively identical, with only the difference of a single platform. Further, while the two characters play differently, their differences don't work quite as well. Cap deals more damage and can block some shots with his shield, while Hawkeye's main thing is he can shoot in three directions, straight ahead, straight up, and at a 45-degree angle in which the character is facing. But what this means ultimately is Hawkeye takes more damage over time when he's in action because he deals less. Thus he has to be on screen with enemies longer in order to deal that damage. Now, if the enemies got stunned when they were hit, this would be less of an issue. Or if Hawkeye was able to shoot more shots than Cap could, this wouldn't be an issue. But instead, what happens is Hawkeye's only really can have one arrow out at a time, one shot on screen at a time. Which means that an enemy can approach more quickly then Hawkeye can deal damage to them. Now, it takes about 3 arrow shots from Hawkeye to drop a normal enemy, 2 or 3, while for Cap's shield, it takes 1 hit, maybe 2 for harder enemies, maybe a little more. But the difference being is because of this setup and because enemies can't be stun locked, we have a situation here where when an enemy is approaching Hawkeye, you have to just keep shooting arrows at him and keep shooting arrows at them while they're getting ever closer, which means before you have a chance to take the enemy out, you have been hit. Whereas Cap, he hits the enemy with the shield, they go down, they don't get an opportunity to do damage to him. so he is getting hit less. Combine that with the shield, which lets you block additional damage, and basically, the game is heavily balanced in Cap's favor. There's no real equalization for Hawkeye to make him a more reasonable character in the game, aside from the 45-degree angle shot and the ability to shoot straight up. That's it. This game really had the potential to be a much better title, but it failed so spectacularly in some very basic gameplay balance elements. Either give this game a miss or play it with a Game Genie so you have unlimited health or something. Next up is the second Town and Country surf design game from LJN with Thrilla's Surfari. Rather than just being a collection of minigames, this game is a more conventional action game, sort of platformy, featuring T&C's mascot of Thrilla Gorilla, or one of their mascots. We have maps of the first two worlds of the game. Thrilla's Surfari is a game that I would describe as a clean run game. A game which is frustrating and somewhat obnoxious to play as you try to learn the levels, but provides a certain degree of satisfaction once you figure out what you need to do to beat the level, at which point you go through the level in a clean run, without necessarily getting any hits on you, because if you get hit, then you fail, and without getting hung up on obstacles or hitting obstacles, because, again, if you hit an obstacle, you fail. So, this is a style of gameplay that I describe as like what you see with some of the modern, quote-unquote, masocore platformers like Super Meat Boy or Super Dust Force, and some of the levels that you see made with Super Mario Maker. There is one significant difference, though. Those games have, effectively, unlimited lives. Thrillist Surfari limits the number of lives available to the player. Honestly, this is a game where, were you to use an unlimited lives code with Game Genie or something else, this could actually be a lot more interesting and a lot more fun than as it exists right now. Because of this, with a Game Genie, or with a Retron 5 with cheats enabled, this could be a very fun game, and definitely something that's more fun from a single-player standpoint than the first T&C Surf design. In fact, I could see this being a really fun game for speedrunners. Next up is Yoshi, a puzzle game for the NES where you have to sandwich Mario enemies between halves of a Yoshi egg. We have notes on managing enemies so you can better win. Yoshi is a fairly basic puzzle game. It controls fairly well, and it provides a decent amount of selection when it comes to controlling the pace of the game. You score points by either matching two enemies vertically, which removes both enemies from the board, or, as I mentioned before, sandwiching the enemies between the upper and lower halves of a Yoshi egg, at which point they collapse together and present a Yoshi on the board, and you get more points this way. This leads me to my real complaint of the game. With the matching enemies, it's only can be done vertically, not horizontally, which actually makes enemy management a little more difficult and a little trickier. While this does prevent some unintentional matches, thus sabotaging your attempts to get the a sufficiently large egg, or sufficiently full egg. To put this in contrast, in Dr. Mario, you can match your colors on your pills and with the viruses vertically and horizontally. And being able to match enemies horizontally in that game, or do matches horizontally, allowed you to take what could potentially be an unwinnable situation and yank victory out of the jaws of defeat. It adds a whole other level of skill outside from, say, the random chance of the color of the next pill being dropped. Here, with the fact that you only have a limited number of slots that things can be dropped down, and a limited amount of space, their skill-based nature of the gameplay is kind of reduced, because you're a lot more focused on the random number generator, on what types of enemies the game decides to spawn. I mean, yes, Tetris has the same thing going on, but there is a certain degree of skill and spatial recognition involved in Tetris in terms of recognizing what pieces go where. If you watch high-level Tetris play, and having done so, both by watching the Summer Games Done Quick stream and watching Tetris tournaments at Portland Retro Gaming Expo, I see how the skill works to get how the skill can counteract the random chance in Tetris due to the size of the grid, the size of the pieces, and all these other factors. With Yoshi on the NES, the scope of the board, effectively, in terms of the size of the enemies and the size of the board in terms of width of the lanes, makes a situation where the random number generator can screw you a lot more often. And it's a bit trickier from a skill standpoint to mitigate this. To mitigate getting screwed by the random number generator. That said, if there was a version of this with horizontal matching, that'd be great. And I do like the concept of managing falling enemies and also trying to sandwich them between two things to make a, for lack of a better term, sandwich, a big sandwich of enemies or what have you. I could even see, like, I don't know, a Burger Time spin-off game. Basically doing the same sort of puzzle concept, and I'd actually be interested in playing that. But as far as Yoshi goes, this game, it does kind of fall flat in more than a few respects. We have a whole bunch of codes and cheats in the classified information column, including one that gives you unlimited continues in Swordmaster. In the Legend of Zelda comic, Link's next goal is to go to the Tower of Hera in Death Mountain, before he is able to, at long last, obtain the Master Sword. Moving into Game Boy titles, we have Star Trek. This is a much more action-based game than the NES version, and I'd argue it doesn't tonally fit with the license as well. Also, I was not able to get this game to work, so a review is impossible. The cart does have a nice chiptune version of Alexander Courage's theme from the TV show, though. We next have a pair of combat flight simulators for the Game Boy. Turn and Burn from Absolute, and Top Gun from Konami. I feel bad doing this, particularly since I also ran into problems with Star Trek, but considering the problems I ran into last issue due to length, and also considering that flight sims barely work on the NES, and the Game Boy has a much smaller screen resolution and screen size, and I believe the last flight sim I tried out on the Game Boy was utterly terrible, I'm just going to give these games a miss and recommend you do the same. If you're going to get a flight sim on a home console from the 90s, go with, like, you know, the SNES.